Ready?
Go ahead.
Oh, wow, well, that was quick.
I really appreciate you letting me come and do this. I think I was asked to speak to you last October, and I like never leave town, but I was scheduled to go to New York for a conference. And I appreciate you remembering to schedule me back, so thank you. I just real briefly cover some highlights. I'm privileged to be your county commissioner. I can't believe I've been here this long. I never intended to be. I'm going to run for one more term because I think we're very close to getting the jail. So I didn't think I was going to run again, but I'm going to do this one more time because I want to try to see if we can finish this out. We've had a 30-year black eye on our community with this monstrosity, and I think we're very close to getting it figured out. And for any of you who did vote to help us get the bond for the new jail last year, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, because we needed some resources to move the ball on this. I'll just cover a couple of highlights real quick, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. We'll just talk about the jail, because everywhere I go, my great aunt is in the hospital. She's 96. I'm her only person to take care of her, and every nurse at the hospital had an opinion about where the jail should and shouldn't go. I'm gonna guess y'all might have some similar feelings, so I'll just try to cover it real quick. So a couple of things happened this time. One is that we created a citizen committee, which is the first time in county history. So there are 7 volunteer citizens with real steep pedigrees in construction and background. And my appointee, Pat McCoy, lives here in Northwest Oklahoma City, actually had built 6 jails in his career as an architect. So we have people who actually have done this before, who know a little bit about what they're doing. Other people have maybe not built jails, but they've built large buildings and have construction background and understand how contracts work and different things with vendors. And then we have hired a company to design it who have built jails before. So that was not the case back in the 80s when this jail that we currently have now was built and opened in 1991. And so a lot of the problems, they may have known how to build office spaces, but they had never built a jail and didn't think about certain things. So there's a lot of logistics. And basically that's because we have a vertical tower. It's a 13-story high-rise jail. DOJ sanctioned it at the time. They won't even do that now. They won't do one usually higher than 6 floors. And so we'll just eliminate 70% of our issues, I always say, if we can just get to a horizontal plan, a 1-level jail. So that's why you see all the debate in the news about where we go find a place, because we need a pretty good spot of earth to do that. We have to have 30 acres. We really would like to have 40, and that's kind of again on the minimum, and I've been trying to get 80. And the reason is because we're fooling ourselves if we don't think there's going to need to be growth in the future. And like you see in the debate with highways and turnpikes right now, when an area gets developed, it's landlocked, and it's very controversial to start expanding at that point. If we'll buff out the area and have it, it'll be there for future. I also had visited with you a couple this morning. It's my vision that we'd eventually have a Justice Center complex. That will exceed my time in office, but I hope that future county commissioners can take and build on this foundation where we can actually have courtrooms out there. I hope we can have office space for lawyers and bail bondsmen, not to overuse the cliche of a one-stop shop, but to expedite everybody. That won't change their justice outcome. It'll just allow that process to happen more efficiently and expeditiously, because the huge cost is the drag. Sometimes it takes maybe 3 to 4 days to get someone spun in and out of there who was going to be released anyway. It's not a matter of being soft on crime, that's just the processes take so long. And it's because sometimes of the logistics. And I know everybody's getting a little upset about the airport being so far away from the courthouse and the transport back and forth, and judges are very alarmed at how this is going to delay the time for courts to start and the backlog if people get hung up in traffic. But there are no parcels of land sufficient in downtown, and that's not going to come to a surprise to any one of you here. Even if we were going to go back with a vertical tower, there's virtually no place left downtown. And it can't be that you've become the 20th largest city in the United States and not be mostly developed at this point. So that's where we are. We have some consequences to our success. You know, this is how we've progressed as a community, so it also limits us in other areas. But we'll get used to a new outer loop, and I don't think it will take too long for that to happen. And if we can get video teleconferencing, which is what most major metropolitan areas have gone to, we just have a sort of an old-fashioned expectation that the inmate has to be brought over and have an appearance in front of the judge, in front of all the people in the courtroom. But most major cities have gone to some form of teleconferencing for at least the arraignment hearings. Now, you still, of course, can come over for your trial and all that and stand in front of the jurors, but just those procedural hearings that go on, that set your trial date, set your bond amount, and those kind of things, we really could do that a whole lot cheaper if we would just utilize technology. So that takes elected judges, who nobody's the boss of them except you, the people, and it takes an elected DA, same situation, and the public defender and some of the trial. It takes some people getting on board. A county commissioner can't just dictate it, but we can provide that opportunity for them, and hopefully they will utilize it. And then I would say this, that we have selected a couple of parcels by the airport. They are on the west side of it on MacArthur. It's kind of an industrial area out there. In fact, they've been baling hay on these properties for the past 20 years. It's just pretty rustic. It kind of leads down to FAA in that area, if you've got a frame of reference, along 54th and South MacArthur, where Newcastle Road cuts through there. And now, the FAA did offer that to our citizen committee, and we tried to go about this in a way I think most of you would appreciate. We tried to be transparent. We put this portal process out there and requested proposals where volunteer landowners could offer up their land and say they wanted to sell it for the purpose of a jail. So it's not us playing like a realtor and going around knocking doors saying, like these calls we all get, can I buy your home, type of thing. No. And what we were trying to do there is show everybody the process, so there's no deal, there's been no crony thing come through, and then these 7 citizens who have nothing to gain, who get no compensation, who have this background, they've been going through it and trying to determine, no, there's an environmental problem on that, no, that one's way too far away from where we would have to tie into the sewer main, and the utility deployment to that property would be way cost prohibitive. All those things that are beyond maybe what we see with our naked eyes. We just drive back a hayfield, And so they've got us narrowed down, and there were a lot of concerns about things next to parks and schools and neighborhoods and businesses and churches. And we were trying to be sensitive to all that, but back to us being a fairly densely populated community, wasn't many options, that weren't going to affect somebody. And so in these proposals, this is what I really want to be clear, the airport authority is technically the owner of these properties, and they offered it for lease. But the district attorney, and I don't think probably too many of you would disagree with her about this, she ruled that we can only build a permanent structure on land that we own, not something that we're renting, because this isn't like a trailer park and you get upset with their lot rates and you decide to pull your trailer off to another place. This is going to be here until it's not. And so it's very complicated. It's just not like Linda and I working out a land deal. We have an airport authority, we have TSA, we have Homeland Security, we have FAA. Amazon is a major tenant in that area. They have some concerns about this, and then the airport authority, and ultimately the city council. So that's what you're seeing play out, and why it's not just been like, well, it's selected, so what's the problem here? And since they only offered it as a lease, which is all they've ever done, including Amazon. Amazon built those giant places out there on rented property. Well, they're a business, they can choose to do that if that's the way they want to spend their money. But we have your money, and we can't do that, according to the DA. So we are waiting on them to make the philosophical decision if they're going to depart from policy and precedent and make a change in what they've never done in history, which is to agree to sell some of the land that they've acquired. And the reason it can't be some of the other parcels is there were some bond monies that came from FAA and the federal government. And there is a way to undo that, but if you've ever pulled out a strand of Christmas lights and it's all wadded up, it's very similar. And how you would work through the channels of government and refund those bonds to get it released to make it available for sale again. So we have chosen the area, and if you saw the little diagram in the newspaper, it's kind of a triangle, little odd-shaped thing. And the reason for that is it's an area that FAA has said, probably doesn't affect their flight problems. It doesn't have these bonds associated with it, and so that's the reason. It otherwise kind of looks like a kid got a hold of something with some scissors and just made an odd shape. But we can, according to these experts and the company we hired, build a jail that will be there. It might make it have a little bit of a unique design. We also believe it would allow us to fit the mental health facility, which is a component that comes along with it, which is going to be a huge game changer, I think, in our community, because we really can't be shocked when we see these reoccurring people come over and over and over again when something is just not quite right, and we've never addressed the root cause of the problem. How shocked are we that they come back to us again? And I think this is going to make a huge impact to the community when we can get these individuals some humane help and also bring some relief to our community to not be troubled by them over and over and over again. And then lastly, I'll just point out that I started a program called Shine when I first came into office, and I think some of you here work with Charles from my office. I know Robin does, and in the West 10 Penn district for sure, but even throughout here. So instead of 30, 60, 90 days in jail, we would have the judges sentence them to our crew, and they would go out and clean up graffiti and trash and do public works projects on schools, parks, and neighborhoods. We've worked with a lot of neighborhood associations, which is why I always like to get a chance to speak in front of you. In case you're doing a cleanup project or whatever, we can come in and assist. We can't go on the private property except to remove red cedar trees and graffiti by law. But we can go on there and so far as the easement. So if you bring out the stuff, kind of like you set out for Big Trash Day, if your neighborhood is working on that. Now, if it's public land, of course, we can go in there and work on that, no problem. But we have gotten to the point now where we're hauling off approximately 3 industrial dumpster loads a day of debris. And we actually, a couple of years ago, got the presiding judge to finally issue an administrative order to quit sentencing people to weekend jail. I don't know if you knew about weekend jail, but they get a sentence, they decided, community service is not quite enough, we need to really teach you a lesson, so you're safe to be out in public 5 days a week, and on Friday night, we want you to report into the jail, throw your wrist up, we'll go ahead and arrest you on the 2 busiest days we have at the jail. We'll add to our problem, and then on Sunday night, right before dinner time, we'll kick you out. And then we need you to do that every weekend. So, they miss church, they miss the time to be around their family, and if you're safe enough to be in the public Monday through Friday, I think you don't really need to be in jail. And all that means, while we're teaching them a lesson, is you're paying for it. And so whatever offense they did, then they just get another 2 days on the taxpayer dime, for however many times. So instead, we got the judge to issue an administrative order, no more weekend jail, and they go directly to Shine, and they work every Saturday and Sunday and whatever. And so they start in the morning and they end in the afternoon, so they can still go to church if they want to. They can still go to their kids' baseball games that night or Friday night or whatever and be a part of their family unit instead of us having to raise their kids, us having to feed them, us having to take care of their health care. So they're still responsible for all that, and then they actually go out in the community and do something to pay off their debt to society that's good for the community as a whole. And so a lot of them have actually been pretty excited about the projects we've done, and we've had a number of them that will stay beyond even their time, and they'll say, I just want to finish this up and stuff, and they're proud of what they're showing their kids. And then we have Students for Shine, which every kid who wants to before they graduate high school or college that does 100 hours of voluntary community service gets a distinguished graduate cord from me and a certificate. And so the phenomenon kind of became that the students started out producing those court-mandated offenders, and they rolled up their sleeves and really got after some of the projects that I dare say were a whole lot more gnarly than the things we typically take the offenders to. So when you hear so much bad stuff about youth today, I always like to throw that out. There's a whole lot of reason for optimism, and I'm particularly encouraged because more often than not, our highest participants are from some of the inner city schools in the more economically repressed areas. I think we've only had a couple of graduates from more of the prestigious schools. It's the kids that maybe have nots and have no family transportation or certainly don't have their own cars that are figuring out ways to give back, and I could get into a whole speech about things about they do. It's really innovative. And lastly, so most of these ideas came to me. I'm not really that smart to figure it all out, but a person that was running the Daily Living Center, you know, right over here on 31st and Rockwell, so just a stone's throw from here. And they have 3 centers, one in Edmond and also in South Oklahoma City. And she said, hey, we want to get in on this. And I'm thinking, my grandpa was in this facility, and they're either mentally or physically pretty restricted, but maybe not enough to be in a nursing home, but they need someone to spot them during the day while their loved ones are at work, which was exactly the situation with my grandpa. And so that we avoided keeping him in a nursing home through that partnership, but I always was thinking, what can my grandpa have done? I just can't think. And she said, don't you worry about what they do. Just tell me that you'll recognize them for whatever they do. But maybe not the 100 hours that a young buck student does. And it turned out to be that we're now honoring these individuals for over 500 and 700 hours. And we started this 21 months ago. And they have collectively, through the 3 centers, done over 50,000 hours just in those 3. So I wanted to particularly mention that because it's so close to here. And for those that are able, they're able to get out and go over to a neighboring community. We've done community gardens, which I can also tell you Shine does community gardens. We have about 10 of them throughout the community if you're ever want to be involved. We like people to come help us because if we have more stakeholders in the communities take on a role with that, like helping us water or pull a few weeds, it expands our bandwidth for the offender Shine crew so that we can continue to provide more. But regardless of what area they're in or what location you are welcome to go take it. It's just free food for the public as a whole. And I'm talking about some pretty large gardens. And we had a philanthropist in Norman who pays for all the plants and the rich topsoil and the gardener to tell me what to do because I don't know what to do in terms of planting. And we do a spring, summer, and fall garden. And so it's only about 4 months out of the year that the land is dormant. And so we have a lot of people who come from different areas of town and they go over there and say, maybe it was too much for me to do, or I don't have a backyard suitable in my own home, but they can come over there and do it. And they've made a lot of friends. We've got great community activities around there. But these individuals at the Daily Living Center have done a lot of projects inside the center for those that are too restricted to be able to go out on some of those field trips. But just a lot for you to feel good about. And as far as the jail, we've made an advancement, and I hope you feel good about that too. Help is on the way. I think we're getting very close. And I promised I wouldn't be long. So I'm ending that, and I'll take some questions if anybody has any. It was designed for 1,200, and they double bunked it and made it 2,400. And then when it was really overcrowded, they put fiberglass boats in the floor, which allowed for up to about 2,800. But for the double bunking, as far as the Department of Justice is concerned, the cells are permanently built at about 5 square feet too short for double bunking. And there's no way in the design of the building to go in there and tear out those concrete walls without everything collapsing. They're load-bearing walls and stuff. It was designed as almost a maximum security prison. It's not a direct supervision barrack style bunking, which a lot of modern jails have, and doesn't allow for very much remodeling or flexibility. So that's been a huge part of the problem. Well, it will depend on the size of land we ultimately get, but obviously it needs to be bigger because that's part of the problem. Department of Justice keeps us under review, but we're also hoping that the mental health facility can offset some of that with mental health, because they really shouldn't be incarcerated. They really need to be in a mental health facility. And I should also mention, and Tim Tardy-Bono's here, he helped us with getting a public-private partnership together where we moved the Griffin Memorial Hospital from Norman. We bought it as a community and we've brought it here, and it will now be on 10th and Portland at the OSU OKC campus, which is going to be a terrific. In fact, I was talking to them yesterday and they are so excited about what that can mean for programming for the students. They're going to offer additional classes for those who want to get into different psychiatric and psychology courses, and they'll be able to work with these individuals. And then I know Norman probably feels like they needed it too, but we also desperately need it. And so between the two, I'm hoping it's really going to offset. I hope that you're going to look out across the landscape and a number of these individuals that we see out on the street or whatever will be lessened in part by that, because they're obviously in need of some mental health.
I don't remember what I was gonna ask.
Okay.
Short-term memory.
Yes, sir.
Can anything be done with the current jail building?
Well, it's on a very small piece of land, about 8 acres. In fact, when it opened day one, if it's fully staffed, there wasn't enough parking for even the employees, which is such a dumb design. And you talk about being landlocked and not thinking ahead for the future. I mean, there's no greater example. It was built as a maximum security prison. The problem is that they put the plumbing in concrete floors with no crawl spaces or manholes, if you can imagine. It's built on a riverbed, and so the water table is up really high underneath it. And the electrical is also similarly put behind concrete walls with no access, so the electrical is becoming antiquated. It will be years. It has to continue to work until we have the new one completely opened, so it has to function until that time. So it'll be a decision made down the road, but it will, because it's built up around it, it'll have to be imploded like they do buildings in Chicago and New York. It has to be very contained, and that's expensive. And we've had some at least argue that the land underneath it isn't worth what the cost is of imploding it. So it'll probably be another cost endeavor of what we'll have to face in the future if no one can think of it. Other communities do abandoned jails created like jail motels, and they have a Gothic look, you know, and there's some sort of a haunted house type things, but they weren't 13-story high-rises. That's not really cost effective. Some have suggested it might work for like Google for a data farm or something because it was designed for maximum security, but it would take obviously a major overhaul of the electrical to support certainly a data farm, but it will probably be a decision made by future commissioners. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I saw actually one of the commissioners speaking this morning, that y'all put in an offer yesterday for 54 acres for asking them to rezone and all that yesterday, I guess. And he was, had the same concern that he didn't know if that was big enough, and you had expressed that 80 acres being ideal. Is there a possibility in that location to get to that 80? If they accept the 54 do that, if you get to 54, will there be another issue that you can't get to 80 if you need to?
It definitely doesn't involve being able to do it without that tangled string of Christmas lights. I mean, there
is open land, it would just take some negotiating if that.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I'd say it's going to be hard. I want to add too that this was not my first choice for the jail. I personally thought the old sanitary plant on 10th and I-35, which would be really fast to get people back down to the courthouse. I thought that it's pretty much in ruins around there. It's very industrial. Even the old McDonald's that was there had gone out of business, and so I thought there's just nothing here. And if you have the right mindset, and I know nobody just is excited about a jail being in their backyard, but it's really the economic equivalent of moving like a small hospital. It'll have approximately 400 staff members on campus daily. That doesn't even count all the people who are coming as vendors, loved ones, clergy, lawyers, bail bondsmen. And so it's like all of those you see coming and going out of a hospital. And so it could be a very good economic stimulus for that area, if you will think of it in those terms. It's going to be very much more aesthetically pleasing in terms of the design and the architecture, even from the various renderings I've seen. So not kind of like the real prison-looking type thing that we have now, and I think that's what people have in mind when they think about it. They're like, oh Lordy, I don't want that next to my neighborhood. It's going to torpedo property values. But I think people will build out around it. I think restaurants will come. I think that office spaces will come because lawyers are going to want to be close by because of their clientele base. And I think it would be a real uplifting. So that was my first choice, but the councilwoman there just absolutely threw a fit and said no way, or her dead body. And so it just kind of started this ping pong thing back and forth. And her argument was that Douglas High School is on the other side of I-35. I say we have 6 lanes of 80-mile-an-hour traffic there, and let those inmates try to break out. It'll be like Frogger. They won't make it, And so I just think there would never have been an issue. It's 4 blocks down from John Rex Elementary now. You never, for all of our problems with the jail, hear about there being an issue with the school. Nobody thinks anything about that. So I think, in my opinion, that sort of has become a trumped-up issue in this whole debate. But nevertheless, it's narrowed down, and the citizen committee and all those who spoke out got it over here to the jails at the airport. So, yes, sir.
So I wanted to ask you, so I guess it's gonna be less security, it's not gonna be quite a maximum security type jail, but will there be a section that will be maximum security?
Yeah, there'll be different kinds of security in there. I'm just saying, every single cell in our current facility was designed for like Hannibal Lecter. Just like the worst of the worst, and it's just crazy.
I've been in it. So.
Yeah, well, right, you have. And so it's not most of them are not in most communities that way. They have kind of like barrack style bunking, and may even have a lady watching over a bunch of brutes, and she's kind of like the den mom, and there's never an issue, and it's not as staff intensive right now. This cost us an exorbitant amount of money because of the number of staff that are required. We're by law and regulations having to go do a site check every 15 minutes. They put the windows up high, so if you're vertically challenged, it's just ridiculous. You've got to get up there, and you have a limited vantage point to look down into the cell. And again, those doors, to replace all that and make it fit and remain secure, it was a very poor design. Now.
Okay, who designed this present jail? Are they still alive?
They're pretty much all dead. And it's kind of like the Kennedy assassination. Most of the people that were involved in it mysteriously died an early death. And I kind of thought it was God's way. There was a commissioner who voted, she's now deceased, but there was one commissioner who had voted against a lot of it at the time, and she had outlived her colleagues by quite a while, and I always told her it was because she had voted no. There was a little bit spared her.
How many acres is down? You said just a very 5 acres down now.
I think it's 8, isn't that right, Tim? That it currently sits on, including the dinky parking lots.
And how big is the new land over there on the MacArthur?
If we can get it all, it's 54 acres. But I want to stress to everybody that they only offered it as a lease, and if they choose to not make a deviation from their precedent of never selling any property they acquire, we're back to the drawing board on where to go. So I'm optimistic, but I don't want everybody's hopes to get up in case it doesn't work out. And it won't be because the city's trying to sabotage us or that they're against their fellow local government entity. They have a lot of interests they have to balance too, and I've made it clear with all of my conversations with them that I totally understand that. And who would have thought probably 10 years ago that we would be the 20th largest city in the United States in 2023? And we're all kind of used to having an airport that makes us take a connecting flight if we ever want to go anywhere. And it may not be that way in another 10 or 15 years, and they may need an expansion. So I understand their interest too.
And so that, the land you're wanting to purchase for the jail, would that prohibit their ability to expand, like if they need a longer runway to do the international?
Not necessarily, but I just know that they have lots of interest. I don't really know enough about their wheelhouse to understand all the ins and outs, but
But they're a public trust, right? I mean,
they are.
Yeah.
And they're really a
Your city
subs-
council member sits on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and, yeah, Barbara Peck, sits on that, and so if you have thoughts or concerns about it, you may want to visit with her about it, cause she gets a vote first as an airport trustee and then later as a member of the city council. Yes, ma'am.
How long is the lease? Is it 100 years or 200 years?
Well, we never got that far because the DA said you can't entertain the lease because it has to be purchased. So I tried that because I thought if we could get a 75 or 99-year lease, we could. Yes, sir.
On a positive point, we are not having the healthiest person put in jail. We have druggies and everything else coming in there. And it bothers me that the jail gets blamed for all those deaths that's occurring in there. And they're coming in all doped up. They're coming in with bad health, heart trouble, high blood pressure. And the jail gets blamed for that. We had 10 die. How many die in the hospital? I mean, you come in there with bad health, you're gonna die. I'd like to see something different, explain, hey, this is what's happening. I'm just giving a positive point. It bothers me as a taxpayer. That place is getting blamed for nasties.
I want you to be the next one the news interviews.
What'd you say?
Because you did it. The other problem is, and it's a new phenomenon, and we're not unique, it's all across the nation, and it's fentanyl.
Yeah.
2 to 4 grains of salt, if you just throw out a little salt on the table from your salt shaker, is enough to kill any one of us in here.
Yeah.
And if it gets laced with a lot of these other drugs, and drug lords are doing it because it's addictive and they want them to want their stuff and make it extra kick and whatever, but if their biochemistry doesn't react well to that, or they've put too much in, which a grain can be too much, and it's virtually impossible to inoculate against it. You can put it right here in the bed of your ear, and it just looks like you kind of got some grits of sand or dirt in your ears if you have a Q-tip lately. You can put it underneath your fingernails if you've got a little bit, and you can tuck it underneath your cuticle there a little bit where it's pretty, it'll stay and can get you all the way through booking. So we pat them down and we look for them. We even have a machine that x-rays them a little bit and goes, and it gets most of all the contraband. But this is no longer like the cocaine and other stuff that they would try to get in, and heroin and the stuff that was a little bit more sizable and easily detected. So it for some reason the press just loves Oklahoma County, but it's a problem in all the DOC facilities and all the other jails across the county, across the state and the country, both. So I appreciate you pointing that out, because that's often the case, but we're not going to see less fentanyl deaths. It's impossible to block against it, and it's becoming more readily available, sadly, unfortunately, on the black market. I know your time is up, so I promised Linda I was not going to drag y'all out. Is that good?